What's up, folks? I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, here with a look at week number 8 in the UFL season, and it is becoming Adrian Martinez or bust at quarterback every single week. Once again, Adrian Martinez, our favorite play on this slate, with a floor of 28 plus DraftKings points in 4 starts now in the UFL, and a matchup against the Houston Roughnecks. Birmingham favored by 16 points this weekend. Birmingham with the highest implied team total of 29.5 points on the board as well, according to our friends here at DraftKings Sportsbook. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to overthink the quarterback position here. I think you just slot Martinez in if you're playing cash games, small field contests, and move on with the rest of your build at quarterback. The reason for that being that we have a lot of uncertainty on the board. A.J. McCarron is unlikely to play this weekend due to an ankle injury. St. Louis just signed another quarterback, Drew Plitt. They have both Brandon Silvers from previous iterations of spring football leagues and Manny Wilkins, who has been the QB2 most weeks here, available to play. I would expect them to potentially rotate or split opportunities similar to the Michigan quarterbacks last week. For Memphis, Troy Williams is out. Case Cookus is going to be back under center. Good news for those of us who want to potentially target the Showboats offensive line for sacks, because Cookus has, unfortunately for him, been taking quite a few of them. For Houston, Guarantano out again after last week's attempt to return. Reed Sinnett will be back in the saddle as the starting quarterback for the Roughnecks. Basically, not a lot of exciting options at quarterback this week. With DC, Jordan Ta'amu left last week's game. We've already seen DeAndre Francois ruled out. He's on injured reserve. Jalen McClendon may have to play if Ta'amu is unable to go. So uncertainty with DC. Talked about the uncertainty with St. Louis at quarterback already. We get to a point where the best option other than Martinez to consider, after I absolutely excoriated him in the last video and he had his best game of the season, is going to be Luis Perez with the Arlington Renegades in their matchup this week with the San Antonio Brahmas. We at least know that Perez, outside of the occasional Wildcat type play for Lindsey Scott Jr., is going to drop back and throw the ball over 30 times and have an opportunity to get there through the air. Just understand he needs to do what he did last week to be worth the price of admission here. 3 touchdown passes, almost 300 yards against Memphis last week. Will he be able to do the same thing here against the Brahmas, who are still fighting for a playoff spot? It remains to be seen. So, long way of saying, just stick with Adrian Martinez unless you're truly galaxy braining large field stuff on this slate. Running back position. The best running back play from a projection standpoint for me is going to be John Lovett. He's got a 20% target share over the last 3 weeks of play for this offense. He's absolutely dominated the touches on the ground. Very inefficient last week against Houston, but gets a chance here against Arlington, who he had a big game against in week number 5 with 2 touchdowns on the ground on his 13 carries. So I would expect to see his efficiency be closer to week 5 against this Renegades defense. Lovett is the second most expensive running back on the board this week, only to St. Louis's Jacob Sailors, who could be in for an increased workload with some uncertainty at the quarterback position. He's my second favorite play at running back. Lovett's Brahmas are expected to be playing in the most hotly contested game of the weekend. This game has a 3.5 point spread in favor of the Brahmas right now on DraftKings Sportsbook. So you are looking at a potentially neutral game script as far as touches go. Sailors, the most expensive back, is going to be playing for a Battlehawks team that currently is favored by 7.5 points. I don't think this line is fully accounting for A.J. McCarron being unavailable to play. So that might be something that changes over the next 24 hours or so. But Sailors would be a good opportunity. Your best opportunity as far as looking at positive game scripts, Ricky Person Jr., now that C.J. Marable is definitely going to be out this week, should see a ton of touches once again at $8,300. Becomes a little bit more palatable that we don't have to worry about Marable. But for your large field stuff, we know that Skip Holtz likes to split the opportunities relatively evenly. If we look at Marable's last 2 games after he missed week 5 carries, 7 carries, 5 targets, 1 target. There's going to be 8 to 10 touches available for Larry Roundtree here on the best team in the league at just $5,000. So we think Roundtree might actually be an interesting high-risk, low-owned play. Should get that 8 to 10 touches and have an opportunity to potentially score a touchdown, much like he did last time against the Houston Roughnecks. So something to be aware of as we get ready here for this weekend's action. Roundtree as a total punt at the running back position on the biggest favorite. Definitely a possible option. The Michigan Panthers probably going to be my favorite backfield here in their matchup with the Showboats. We've seen Wes Hills get most of the traditional early down between the tackle stuff with not a tremendous amount of involvement in the passing game. He's $8,600 here. My favorite of the two Panther running backs is going to be Matthew Colburn. Colburn has had more touches in this backfield, has been super efficient over the last few weeks. Obviously had a huge game against DC, who I think we can safely say is the worst rush defense in the league right now. But Memphis and what they were able to allow Devion Smith to do last week with Arlington as a big favorite. Understand that Colburn and Hills here are both in that position now. And at $7,500, Colburn is also one of the best values on this slate. And I think he's my favorite running back to slot in at the first or only running back spot you need to use technically with that game coming off the board first here. Underdog running backs, I guess we have to address the big game that Devion Smith had last week, 14 carries, 5 targets. Every other tailback only had like 1 to 2 touches for Arlington, so maybe he's finally a true bell cow here as Arlington looks to wrap up the season. Still just $7,300, definitely in play in a neutral game script there. Arlington only underdog by 3.5 points. DC, I don't have any interest in any of these guys. Houston, I don't have interest in Pledger or Thompson, with them being the biggest underdogs on the board. And on the Showboats, Darius Victor is still definitely dominating all the opportunities at running back, but there's really no fantasy production to speak of here that we need to get excited about. So I think I'm crossing him off as well. Wide receiver position, on the flip side, David Davis is going to have the best projection for me this week with his super high upside involvement in the Showboats offense. Likely trailing game script, should see between 6 to 8 targets, if not more. 9+ targets in each of the last 3 weeks. Probably lower owned because of how poorly this offense has been performing. Most people's wide receiver one, who else? Hakeem Butler leads the league in touchdowns, leads the league in receiving yardage, leads the league in opportunities now that another wide receiver is on injured reserve and is not available for us to consider whatsoever for the rest of the season. More on that in a second. Butler is going to see at least 8 targets this week. He's had that total in each of the last 5 weeks of the season. And after not scoring last week, I'm not going to say he's an underperforming wide receiver, but I would expect potentially something to change there. Only issue is dealing with a little bit of a change at the quarterback position with A.J. McCarron, not expected to play in week number 8 due to his injured ankle. We have other wide receivers on the Battlehawks that I think are interesting. Stephen Mitchell Jr.'s price is still just $4,500, but he also ran every single route at wide receiver alongside Hakeem Butler last week. So Mitchell's one of my favorite punt plays at wide receiver this week. We have another one with the Michigan Panthers. Siosi Mariner is going to be out this week with a concussion. When he left after the first drive in last week's game for the Panthers, we actually saw Samson Nacua, brother of Puka Nacua, play a ton of snaps, become the UFL's version of Puka Nacua, if you will, as far as target share is concerned, with 7 targets from Panthers quarterbacks last week. I'd expect to see a similar workload for him at $4,700 on a team with the second highest total on the board behind Birmingham. So that's why Nacua is going to be one of my favorite plays as well. So you have Mitchell from St. Louis. We have Nacua from Michigan as cheap plays. The usual suspects rounding out top plays at pass catcher. Justin Hall, almost certainly a trailing game script. 16-point underdogs here against the Stallions. Javonta Payton, or JP Payton here on DraftKings with the Renegades, had like 170 air yards last week against the Memphis Showboats. 6+ targets in each of the last 3 weeks. Has significantly higher upside than Tyler Vaughn's lately in this offense. So I like him as a play. Sticking with the Renegades, Sal Cannella catches every ball thrown his way, it seems. 9 targets, 9 catches last week, 8+ targets each of the last 3 weeks. Chasing the box score results here a little bit now that he scored 3 times in the last 2 weeks. But Cannella at $6,400, also very playable. Despite getting into the box last weekend, Deion Kane still underperformed his target and air yard opportunity for Birmingham in that game. And he went back to running the most routes at wide receiver as well. So I would expect Kane to be a really strong play, just $7,800 on the best offense in football. So I'd like to get him into my lineups once again. I'm going down with the ship, chasing Deion Kane air yards for sure. Speaking of chasing air yards and going down with the ship, John Trey Kirkland, little bit of inefficiency at quarterback since Chase Garbers went down. Quentin Dormady benched last week for Kevin Hogan. Kirkland's still not getting the results that we want here, but still leaves the Brahmas in opportunities at wide receiver. You're just paying an exorbitant amount for it. Now, on to the biggest opportunity at pass catcher on this slate. Kelvin Harmon is on injured reserve with a hamstring injury. He's done for the season for the Defenders. Harmon had like a 35% target share over the last 3 weeks, so it completely opens up the opportunities at pass catcher. Saw a long touchdown last week for Ty Scott, playing a ton of snaps, running a ton of routes on the outside for this team. Once again, going to be a great play, just $5,200. But with Harmon out, we have opportunities galore for each of Kiki QT with some NFL pedigree, Chris Rowland, who we've seen make some big plays, Brandon Smith should see his participation uptick a little bit. Vincent Smith has had some big target games in the past here. Going to have to keep an eye on DC's depth chart when it comes out tonight to see who is going to be taking over Harmon's opportunities formally, but plenty of opportunity here with low salary to figure out the rest of your lineups. Favorite defenses on the board this week, obviously the Stallions favored by 16 points, but we have the Panthers facing the very sack and turnover prone Memphis Showboats. DC facing a backup quarterback for St. Louis could be kind of interesting this week. And then I will also be on board with the Renegades, still just $3,600, facing San Antonio and their quarterback inefficiency. So that's kind of where we're at on this slate, guys. Have plenty of salary here to round out your lineup. Play another one of these high upside running backs like Sailors, like Lovett. That is how I am looking at week number 8 here in the UFL. Good luck if you're playing week number 8 in the UFL. As always, in the Occupy Fantasy Discord, we have free projections for our subscribers for every UFL slate, whether it's the classic slate or each of the single game showdowns here on DraftKings. Just $2.99 a month. You can get access to my projections, which I post every Friday evening in our Discord. Good luck in week number 8. We'll be back next week with week number 9 in the UFL.